Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling, well, a really intense situation. The India-Pakistan escalation back in April 2025. We've pulled together news reports, probably some government statements in there too, to piece together what went down. And frankly, it's pretty sobering stuff.
Definitely sobering.
We're talking about two nuclear powers going right to the edge, not just conventional fighting, but cyber attacks too, and that constant nuclear threat hanging over everything.
Yeah.
So our aim here is to unpack how this incredibly dangerous situation ignited, look at the key moments, and sort of grapple with what it all means for, well, the future of conflict.
And what's really striking is just how fast it all happened. You had this localized terrorist act, and it just cascaded,
Right.
escalated incredibly quickly into a crisis with, frankly, global implications. It just shows how these deep-seated tensions can flare up from a single spark.
Okay, so let's start with that spark. The attack in Pahalgam, Kashmir, that was April 23rd, 2025, right?
That's one. Reports said 26 Hindu pilgrims were killed. A horrific event.
And the finger was pointed almost immediately at Jaish-e-Mohammed, the group allegedly based in Pakistan.
Yes, and India didn't waste time. It wasn't just talk. They blamed Pakistan and took some pretty concrete diplomatic steps right away.
Like suspending the Indus Waters Treaty and the Simla Agreement, too.
Exactly. And those weren't small things. Suspending the Indus Waters Treaty, that governs shared water resources. Vital stuff.
Huge implications there.
Massive. Potentially hitting Pakistan's agriculture, water security down the line. And the Simla Agreement, that was, a framework for their bilateral relationship.
So pulling those closing diplomatic channels, it basically shut down communication.
At the worst possible moment, yeah. It was a really strong signal from India about a shift in their approach, a much harder line.
And it wasn't just diplomatic, was it? Things moved to the military front pretty quickly. May 7th, Operation Sinbad.
That's right. Targeted strikes. Reports mentioned Pakistan occupied Kashmir, Bahawalpur, Muzaffarabad.
The stated goal being Jaish-e-Mohammed leadership and their bases. A direct military answer.
A direct retaliation, yes. Which, well, as you'd expect, led to Pakistan's own response. Operation Bunyan.
Okay, and what did that involve?
Well, this is where it gets interesting and, frankly, more complex. It wasn't just tit-for-tat strikes in the same mold.
How so?
We saw reports mentioning precision strikes, yes, but also significant cyber attacks, targeting infrastructure, apparently.
Critical infrastructure.
That was the claim. And drone attacks, too, hitting targets in Punjab inside India.
So it immediately spread across different domains, not just boots on the ground or jets in the air.
Exactly. Cyber, drones, conventional strikes. It highlights how modern conflicts work now. Disrupting a power grid can be as damaging as a bomb in some ways.
That tit-for-tat is worrying enough, but then came the moment that really pawed things towards the brink. The nuclear fear moment. India hitting the Norcon air base.
Ah, yes. That was the point where I think globally people really started to panic.
Why that specific target? What made it so dangerous?
Location. Norcon air base is incredibly close to Pakistan's nuclear command and control center.
Right.
So even if India intended a purely conventional strike, hitting so close to those assets, the risk of miscalculation or accidental damage,
Yeah.
it's huge.
Unthinkable consequences.
Absolutely. That's when alarm bells went off everywhere. Washington, Beijing, Moscow, the world basically held its breath. That fear of nuclear exchange, it felt terrifyingly real again.
It really did. The reports we saw spoke of widespread panic. This Cold War nightmare scenario suddenly felt very present.
And that's when the international diplomacy kicked into high gear, didn't it?
Yes. The U.S. stepped in quite forcefully. Secretary of State Rubio, Vice President Jared Valerius, they were reportedly heavily involved.
High-level engagement. Shows how seriously Washington took it.
And thankfully, they managed to broker a ceasefire relatively quickly. May 10th, was it?
May 10th, yes. And you could almost hear the collective sigh of relief around the world. A sense that, okay, we've pulled back from the absolute edge.
But pulling back didn't mean the end of the innovations and conflict, unfortunately, because this crisis also revealed something else, something quite new and disturbing.
You mean the water issue?
Exactly. Weaponizing water. India suspending the Indus Waters Treaty wasn't just symbolic, it seems. It had real-world effects.
It did. By releasing dam water, they apparently caused flooding downstream in Pakistan, in the Muzaffarabad region.
So using water flow as a coercive tool.
Pretty much. Flooding at one point, then reportedly reducing water levels later during Pakistan's dry season. It turns a vital resource into, well, another weapon in the arsenal.
A frightening development. It really expands the definition of warfare, doesn't it?
It does. Control over essential resources becoming as critical as military hardware.
And speaking of hardware, there's another layer here. China's potential role? Some analysts suggested China might have been sort of observing closely, maybe even testing things.
There was definitely talk about that. The theory being that China might have used this conflict as a proving ground for some of its military tech supplied to Pakistan.
What kind of tech are we talking about?
Well, reports mention things like the J-10C fighter jets, possibly the HQ-90 surface-to-air missile systems, and those CH-5 drones. Fairly advanced stuff.
So if true, that suggests China wasn't just a passive observer.
It could imply, yes, a deeper strategic alignment, or at least an interest in seeing how their equipment performed in a real high-stakes conflict scenario, potentially against Western-aligned systems on the Indian side.
Adds a whole other geopolitical dimension. Proxy testing grounds.
Potentially. It certainly raises questions about the bigger picture and major power influence.
And amidst all this high-level strategy and tech, let's not forget the impact on people. There was that quote from the retired Indian Lieutenant General after Singh.
Yes, we have not forgotten 2611.
That really hits home, doesn't it? It shows the depth of the history, the grievances, the trauma feeding into this.
Absolutely encapsulates it, how past events cast such a long shadow. And you saw the immediate impact, too, with politicians in Punjab reportedly asking for aid for border residents.
And calling for village defense forces.
Right. Highlighting those immediate security fears for ordinary people caught in the middle. And of course, widespread public anger and anxiety reported on both sides. A reminder of the human cost.
So, wrapping this up, what we've seen in this deep dive is, a terrifying sequence. Terror attack, conventional military strikes, cyber warfare entering the mix.
The nuclear shadow looming incredibly large.
And even water being used as a weapon. It was an extraordinarily dangerous moment.
Pulled back from the brink by diplomacy, thankfully.
But it leaves us with a really critical question, doesn't it? For you, the listener, to think about. In a world with nuclear weapons, cyber threats, and now even the potential to weaponize basic resources like water, can future conflicts really be contained? Or are we entering an era where escalation is just terrifyingly easy and de-escalation much, much harder? Something to really consider. The changing face of war and the risks we all face.